day, Michael. All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome back. My name is David Whitehead, your host, and I'm here once again speaking to Michael Tsarion. And we're just coming back off of a fantastic event program that we did with Michael recently entitled The Female Illuminati, which we've been able to get up and ready on both of our websites, michaeltsarion.com and also modernknowledge.ca. And we're going to be doing some interviews with Michael coming up very soon, getting more in depth on that program. So we're very excited about that. And Michael, I got to say, it was an honor to work with you on that project. And it's also an honor to work with you on this current project, which is ongoing, The Path of the Fool, looking at the 22 major arcana of the tarot, the symbolism, how this relates to us in both the micro and macro world of experience. And I've got to say, looking at this card that we're going to be talking about today, the Chariot, which is episode 8, but card number 7, this was a challenging one for me personally. I was watching through it, and I was on a bit of a roller coaster. There was moments of revelation, and then there was moments of trepidation, and there was moments of ups and downs. I found it to be stretching my own mind in many different directions. And actually, I'm the kind of person, I really enjoy that, because I know that sometimes when you really want to grow in your thinking and challenge your mindset and try to, open yourself up to new paradigms, that can be a difficult process. And you can feel that moment of almost like it's like a mini moment of panic in a way, where you're suddenly going, oh my goodness, I'm being challenged in this time to look at something a little bit differently. But when you go through that process and you allow it to filter through, you reach that next higher revelation, which is kind of what I've been feeling all throughout this series. So I greatly appreciate it. I know from the feedback from other people, they've been feeling similar. Was that sort of how you thought of this card and the series in general? Was, because you've been looking at so many different traditions, the mystical tradition, the religious tradition, the philosophical tradition, and trying to look out and flesh out both the positive and negative aspects of all of them, was it really so that we could challenge our thinking process more so that we can grow and reach those higher revelations?
Yeah, it is. Always with the knowledge that my work doesn't reach everybody, it isn't meant to reach everybody. And it will be those people who've worked out that it's not just about 9/11 conspiracies, as interesting as they are, or bug-eyed aliens, or some sort of other shenanigans which reach the sort of mainstream press or whatever. The connoisseur in this movement soon finds out that you have to go to the level of philosophy and psychology, and that's where that uncomfortableness comes in, because those are subjects that aren't really taught in our schools in the first place. Our parents know very little about it. Often there can be even an open resistance when we get into those subjects. And even though I may be doing tarot or some other occult subject, it's all a means to an end. It's all about getting into the core being, where we're not just talking about we're not talking about collective groups as we're talking about individuals. So there's always going to be that threat there. But see, astrology basically is individualistic. It's all about the self. It's all about you, I mean, even people who don't believe in astrology always know their own star sign and are quite interested if you start a conversation in which you're talking to them, about their sign. I've even had this with Christians who are open to it, actually, and even with their Chinese sign, it's just a conversation point. And they go, I am like my sign. I may not be a big believer in astrology, but when people describe what it's like to be a Scorpio or a Virgo, I am like that. So even on the surface level, there's an intrigue and an interest, and that's very good and very healthy. Plus, we forget that historically speaking, our forefathers were into these subjects just about 100 years ago. It's not something of ancient times. Runes were still being used in Europe up until the 1900s and beyond. Tarot cards have been used all throughout Europe up until even the neoclassical period and even beyond. Then there was a big burgeoning of that subject in the 19th century with the Golden Dawn and other occult societies. Love them or hate them, but it just shows you that this archetypal stuff that Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung was always talking about resurfaced again. So in my work, I'm part of that tradition, and the connoisseur, as I say, gets to realize that it's not really all about mass movements and social phenomena. It's about my own self and where I'm going. And so the man who feels entangled the man who feels that he's out of his depth, the person who feels that has been caught up in all of the miasma of life and has lost his center, there can be in the beginning, as he gets back reoriented again, these subjects can feel a little confusing and a little threatening even, while people go, oh, wait a minute, no, I've got to reclimatize myself to it and get with it. But anytime there comes psychology and philosophy, that curve is a little more than usual. So other people in this field don't really bring in any of these subjects that I do. And so they're more accessible, people like them better because they remain on a very popcorn level, superficial, mostly talking in broad general terms and leaving out the individual component. And I've dived right in there in my work and say, no, it starts with the individual. All change starts with the individual. This is actually demonstrably provable now because haven't we already as society tried everything else? I mean, we have literally tried the entire menu of remedies to fix the ills of this world and none of it's worked. And yet the heroic, behavior of the individuals, is the thing that stands out as being awesome. But those heroic deeds are based on a person's true sense of selfhood. So I'm a big believer in that, and I'm also a big believer in promoting the ones I've learned from, like the Ayn Rands and the Nathaniel Brandon, the Nietzsche's, and all these other wonderful people who were personalists, and they put the individual first. No masters above, no slaves below, because as long as we keep moving into society without that philosophy, then wherever we put our foot, wherever we put our footprint, there's going to be that master-slave dynamic, even when we don't want it. So there's a lot of sanitizing needs to be done on the inner house. So, that's what my work is about. And if I'm using tarot, if I'm using psychology or philosophy, it's all with that in mind, that this is all holy work. And it's a challenge for me, to do these cards as well. They were scripted about 15 years, almost 17 years ago. Actually, but 2000 is when the scripts took form in a written form. You see, so it's been a challenge to wait for the right time to even come forth. Then when I dug it out again for this series, it was challenging to me to say, what was I even thinking when these were written? Is anybody going to dig this? How do we present this? But then I let the work speak back to me, and it led the way. It wasn't like, okay, I've got to put this into some paradigm. It jumped out at me and said, and then with Chris's help, with the graphics aspect, it just came together completely without planning. I never knew when this was going to be pulled out of the drawer because I've been interested in so many other things. We had Female Illuminati to do. I've had Disciples of Mysterium to do. We had the post-humanism thing in the last lot of years, and Germanophobia and many other projects that I've been involved in. So doing the tarot is a massive work. So I always thought, I'll never get to that, until everything is cleaned off the table. But as a matter of fact, the right time came, and to put it up as a free series is a remarkable achievement, and it is like an encyclopedia already. And when it comes to this card, the Chariot, it was a bit of I knew actually 2 cards ahead, a couple of months back, like at Christmas, I knew it was going to be a challenge. So that's why we did an extra long Lovers card number 6, to lay down, that was done strategically because I knew that if I don't put down some of these Gnostic themes, these other themes, at that point, it's going to weaken where we're going with the Chariot and strength. And now people who will actually find this content rather easy to grasp, because if they've watched that magnum opus of the Lovers, where we talk about time, alternative concepts of time and selfhood, and even the mystic tradition, all of that, will start to make sense, because there's you really couldn't come to the bottom of each of these cards, even if you were to work for years. So my job is to try and compress the best parts of it into an hour and a half, and then give people these samples, this buffet, where if they want to chase it up, and we put all the references below. Some people don't even click on show more, so they don't even realize all the links that are below the YouTube window. They definitely need to follow that. So even if they do want to follow it up, even some of the artwork we're putting there, we make sure we link to it. Who the hell is this guy? What's this? So that people can follow it, because I'm passing by things that you could stop and have an entire digression lasting 10 hours over the quote from this guy or the paintings of this guy. But we don't have that time, so we'll leave it to the person to follow up. What's Tsarion saying? Or I've never heard that term before, or I never even knew there was such a thing before. And to educate oneself. This is where the greatest good is knowledge. So the person who wants to be truly good in the eyes of God or in the eyes of their own spirit, it's about learning as much as you can, laying down all these partisan differences and stupid, prejudices, and diving into the knowledge as deeply as they possibly can, not worrying so much about the messenger, but worrying about the message, because it's personal now. And that's again why my message sort of repels a lot of people, because they'd rather dick around with a lot of the, inessentials and airhead stuff, and just simply refuse to go deep. So I say, well, then take off. There's plenty of people out there for you. If you come over here, you're going to have to adopt a different kind of attitude, not to be, but to the knowledge that we're presenting, because it is deep, it is rich, and it's going to take a lot of work from you to follow it through and to mull over in your mind of an evening when you're lying down or thinking, what was that? Wow, that was an incredible statement there by William Blake or Wilhelm Reich or Ayn Rand. Shit, I want to go and read one of her books or something like that. That's, to me, then, the success. Not people saying, Michael, you're wonderful. It's about them going off and saying, hey, I went and read all the collected works of Carl Jung. I went away and read, my Freuds again. I went away and read the Alice Millers, the Wilhelm Reichs, the Otto Ranks, and the whole bevy of people that I'm talking about, or the Alvin Boyd Coons, like we talked about in the Chariot. What a man! Do you realize the education that you could have from just chasing that guy up?
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
PhD of the PhDs. There's PhDs who've never heard of him.
Yeah, it's incredible. Actually, I'll pick up pretty much any page from his writing. I'll just randomly go through. I've got a bunch of his books in PDF form. I'll randomly go through and just find a spot, and I'm in there. And actually, Michael, I got to say, I found the same in this series. I've been reviewing this video over the last couple of days, and I've had to take it up, point by point, and then go and I like to look at some of the different references that you bring up. And I find no matter where I place my marker on the video, I get hooked in right away. There's something that's being said. There's a piece of imagery along with the words you're using that is really pulling me into a new method of inquiry. And I thought you touched on something very interesting, and I think it's very key to looking at our ills of the world, so you say, which is that we have been trying so long and so hard to form some kind of a collective resistance against this tyranny and against all of these things. And I'm sure there is some form of a healthy collectivism that must happen where we're working together. But if you're not an individuated self, if you don't have any understanding of the imperial self and getting through all of that first, how can you then go and match yourself with other people that may not have been on that level and don't have that strength, and you're really aligning yourselves with a weak system of stabilizers of other people around you. You're not really aligning towards something that's going to be effective. So that's why I've always resonated with the message of we really do need to take this on board individually and get through there and go through the psychology and deprogram all that programming that we all have, and then from there we can start looking at some kind of a viable solution, right?
Yeah, because it's like a house of cards. These collective actions will work in the off. There's a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm. It's great to get out and meet people. You've got a common, like the political things, the Green Party, whatever party. And it feels good to be in the warmth of like minds when you've been living alienated and frozen and just going through the streets and looking at people's empty, gunless faces. And then all of a sudden you walk into a place where everyone's sort of passionate. So that's in the early stages. But unfortunately, there's a lot of inbuilt weaknesses, like you say, and it becomes like a house of cards that because the foundation is weak, which means it's collective, it's based on collective action, which is the only way we read change in the last 50, 60 years, because we've been misguided. Then it's like a house of cards situation in which it's somewhat strong at the beginning, but gets weaker and weaker and weaker until eventually it topples. By the way, I want to read you just something that was posted. Where is it? Yeah, by somebody just yesterday on the Path of the Fool page. Can I do that?
Oh, please go ahead. Yeah. This is on the video, in the YouTube.
I don't know who this person is, right? I don't know who this person is, but she says that every time a new release, one of the Path of the Fool programs comes up in this series, it makes my day. I just love this content. It's just wonderful stuff. I also wanted to say great work on the female Illuminati presentation. Watched it live and have been watching it constantly since its release on Modern Knowledge site. Man, Michael, you are just fantastic researcher and teacher. I named my 3-year-old daughter, Arya, in tribute of those long lost forgotten teachers, and also named my 1-year-old Rowan after the sacred tree of the Arya and the Druids. This is how much your work has influenced my life. Thank you. Take care. Best from Canada. You see, so
wow.
It's nice to have the personal anecdote, but it's also important to see that this information has changed that family's life. that kid is now going to go on and say, why am I called this bizarre name? He might be the next living expert in the anthropology of the Druids, for all I know, right?
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to, because he's going to be fascinated about what's all that. Why are my parents obsessed by that, right? And anybody who asks him what his name is, he'll have a whole story to tell about that, which can, so it's just ripple effects, domino effects. That's what it's all about. And I've seen that. So it doesn't matter to me if a smaller group, relatively speaking, is interested in my work, because it's that old Frank Herbert motif of take 10, they train 100. Take 100, they train 1,000. Take 1,000, it's 10,000. I'd rather have it like that than the mass appeal of all the popcorn eaters going, yeah, what did he say? Can you repeat the question? It's like, that's too superficial. There's other people who handle you on those levels. But by the time you come to my work, you should be much more serious and much more willing to dive into the depths of these matters.
Well, I definitely appreciate doing it, and I also appreciate the work that you've done. And like you said, you're bringing forward monumental works from very, very highly intelligent and educated people that have brought this forward before. This is something that we're going into the ancient past, and we're pulling from, going back to the tarot. I mean, that has, the antiquity on that alone is pretty much incalculable. It's so ancient. It's the birth of a lot of what we would call religion, and those are the things. That's where it seems to have gone wrong throughout history. But we're referencing all the way back to that, going through these different religious, mystical, philosophical traditions right up to the present day. We've got these highly advanced thinkers, you've got these psychologists, you've got these people that have been studying psychology. And when you really go through and blend it and come back to the present day, there's an interesting effect that takes place. At least that's what happened for me, is now you have so many reference points to go to, and you have so many ways of comparing and compiling this information that you're going to get more connected with your own inner voice. That's the whole key. That seems to be the message through this whole thing, is like, I like how you call it the imperial self. We're not talking about just the ego self or the materialistic self. We're talking about the deep down real you that has all of that insight and that passion and that knowledge already, and it's just got to find its way back, and it just has to come back to the surface. So pulling that to the surface, as opposed to having this fake facade out there just interacting with the world and not really living, that is something that to me it literally changed my life, and I know it'll change the lives of many people that watch this program.
And it's like those Charles Lindbergh, the great aviator, said that when you really need it, these unseen forces will come in to assist you. What can a massive uneducated shards do without that sort of assistance from the higher self? It's just running around chasing your tail. The man who's in selfhood has powers that come to help him. We can speak of them in metaphysical terms or religious terms, whatever you want. That's really unimportant. The sort of semantics is unimportant. There's something there, a will, another way of reaching people. Maybe the person in selfhood is always going to be stronger because he's awakening the selfhood of other people, which despite their own resistance, actually they inwardly want. So there's going to be a deeper magnetism, a deeper kind of love-hate relationship with that kind of a teacher. There's more need for it because it's going to, like I say, everyone secretly wants to go there. So the person who is going there, they're going to have a special sort of intonation to what they're doing that maybe other teachers who are just, again, serving the surface. And we all need those people. I'm not debunking the need for any of that, beginning stuff. It's needed. But there also is, you need a place to go after that's been achieved.
And balance as well, which is very key, I've noticed in this card as well. And if we kind of jump into the imagery, that's what I always, you've always started off with looking at the card, the actual artistic rendition of the card, and what's really being communicated there. And when you look at it, you've got a vehicle with two wheels, which is the Chariot. You've got the two lions, and you were referencing throughout the card that those lions are kind of representing those different balance points, the authentic, the inauthentic, the two different kinds of desire, two different kinds of time even, physical and mental, right? So there's, just in the imagery alone, there's a whole story that's really being said and really needs to be unpacked.
Yeah, there are definitely images that have their own mastery, their own genius, just the simple aesthetics. Some people might feel them a little stilted, a little weird, not be able to put their finger on exactly why they love them or why they even don't like them, certain cards in the minor arcana look kind of frightening, until you understand why they're done like that. And even in the major arcana, cards like the Tower, cards like Strength, like the Devil, or like Death, can be sort of off-putting until people realize what's happening with those images. No image in itself is inherently negative. But this Chariot, I've got so many emails from people already saying, that they were waiting months for this one, because not that some of them are Cancer by star sign, but others have been fascinated with this card because it seems so enigmatic. It used to be assigned to the Aries, which is your sign, and of course that's wrong. But people would do that because they thought, here's an armored guy carrying a spear on this war chariot. Chariots are often considered, to be carrying the warrior. And this kind of Ben-Hur, Alexander the Great, Pharaoh type of style, you see. And yet, again, the tarot people are playing with you. There's a lot going on in these cards. So but then the Sphinxes to me do represent opposites. But the deep, the one to really focus on is this inner and outer. If the hero, like we said earlier on, is going to go out and do some work for the world, it goes without saying that he must have found some inner balance within first. He has to have done some inner work. So here is the great challenge of mankind, which is, have we done the inner work, or are we just, again, for the entertainment's sake, for the, like I said, the trundle of the wheels, the feeling of the wind in the hair, for sensational purposes, have we just dashed out into the world to fix things without realizing the underground roots of why things went wrong in the first place? And there's a danger that this charioteer is exactly that kind of person. He's a son of Horizon. He's been well trained to realize that the world is full of problems. They don't ask psychological questions. They don't ask about infrastructure questions. They just say, this needs fixed, let's get out there and do it, and let's get out there and do it as efficiently as we possibly can, etc., etc. And they don't even really care then whether what kind of new world they're making in that fixing, right? So it's like, if you're sticking something like a Victorian house, if you just gut it and plaster it over with some modern looking plaster and take out all the stained glass windows and take up all the tiles, yeah, the house is still sort of standing there in a sort of a similar outline or silhouette of what it used to be in its majesty, but it looks like a bloody chicken coop from an architectural point of view. So in all this sticking and piecing together that people are doing in the modern age, slowly over time, the place is becoming looking like, a kindergarten, like a bunch of, the whole of our world, socially and psychologically, is starting to look very simulacral-like. It's not looking authentic and real. And that's because we fail to understand the legacy of the past, our forebears. We have a wrong attitude about how to do these fixes. And again, primarily, we haven't done the inner work so that we can then open up a kind of a guidance, a kind of a flow from the deeper, say you don't want to use any religious language, say you don't want to use any metaphysical language, then still we can talk about it, which is that you're now opening up the deeper parts of your own human consciousness, which sits on millions of years of archival knowledge, archival wisdom, right? We don't have to have a God, we don't have to have any angels involved in this. It's just those deeper levels, which, as I said in the program, there are the constituents of consciousness which we have blocked. So we're walking around already in this sort of straitjacketed situation where our whole being is not actually being expressed. So as this kind of fragmented Frankenstein kind of creature, we then hope to go around and sledgehammer the world into shape. It's not happening. We're at a good place now to know it's not happening. It's not like 50 years ago where people like me, they have so much resistance listening to you. Everyone now knows it's demonstrably true that it's not, something's wrong, and these solutions are not proving correct. So at least that opens a little gap, a little window, a little pause, where people can then say, well, maybe we do actually need to take on another way of looking at this. And my answer to that always is about selfhood. It's about honoring the forebears, the legacies, not reinventing the wheel. In the early stages, you think everything's impossible, but almost everything to fix our society has already been created by the masters of the past. We don't have to plug it in. We don't really have to reinvent any of it. And so my work on my forum and in the other works that I do is to keep presenting these names of those creators who've already thought about these things and come up with brilliant solutions, both psychologically and sociologically, and in every other context you can think about, politically or whatever, the Heideggers and so many other people like I mentioned, and move from there. So we don't really have to sit around there scratching heads. We just need to bring the works of the great ones together and see what they have to say about our modern world and feel productive and optimistic about the future.
Absolutely. And speaking about the future, do you find you're getting any kind of more communication these days, Michael, with sort of the younger generations? I find I personally, when I'm reaching out to a lot of the youth, especially in the work that I do, I'm finding kind of two things. I'm finding just, completely, no expression, no energy, shut down, totally shut off from the world. And then I'm finding those brilliant ones that are just, they're catching on very quickly. They catch on faster than most adults could even dream. It seems to be, and I feel like I'm running into more of that, honestly, when it comes to the younger generation. What's your experience with that?
I'd say it's about 60-40. It's mostly younger people contacting me who got into my work only within about a year. They may have come from other people that they then found wanting, and they're amazed to find in my work all of these advanced sort of levels which they were interested in. They may not be readers, they may not be people who still yet can put their head into a book for any length of time or whatever, but they've certainly start asking the questions. And believe me, I already know what it's like to be at that level, in the beginning, so I'm not necessarily expecting a lot of them, and that's why I've created 13, 14 websites, modulating everything I do, so that if I see somebody saying, here's what your passion is, mostly it's symbolism. I'd say that the younger people come in where they're taking photographs of the things in their own town or city. They've gone online, they've caught my work. I was the first person to be talking about any of this symbolism in a truly occult manner. I'm still talking about it, like in Female Illuminati. And so I think this is a big draw. And I'm not coming at it from a Christian point of view where anything you see is a black cat or a pentagram is somehow evil. This doesn't answer anything. So people have come to my work and found, oh my God, I didn't realize, I just thought this was something you could understand in one go. This is a whole thesis, this is a whole life study. So I have people from Finland, I have people from Croatia, I have people from, South America, Spain. I've got musicians, people in rock bands, who want to know about what cover they should put on their CDs, this kind of thing, and work with the symbolism. So there's a tremendous amount of interest from that point of view in the symbolism. So I always have had the younger people coming in from that. They may not be interested in the philosophy or psychology yet, but whenever you're dealing with symbolism and the symbolism of secret societies and what have you, this is something they can see with their own two eyes. When they were playing ball in the ballpark, there was some monstrous obelisk standing, so all the years of their youth, right? Yeah. So when they hear somebody like me talking, I always wonder what that shit was, man. When they're skateboarding, they're crashing into these things. It's like, what the hell is that? Somebody explain it. So or flags, or even logos and band logos and all of this kind of thing, or sports logos. And also the youth don't need to be told something sucks with the world. They already know that, but it's in an inarticulate way. They might get into some sort of, their explanations are often wrong-headed in the sense that, well, it's just a bunch of rich people, or it's corporations, and they might have a sort of a communistic left-wing sort of response to that, and I think that's where it's at. But as people move forward, they realize, no, the left wing is the same as the right wing. They're just mirrors of each other, and they find that they're disenchanted. So at that point, they come to people like myself or Alex Jones to find out that it is a two-party system. There's something so much more sinister going on, and they hear about these secret societies and so on. So yeah, there is a lot of young people like it because they're coming more from that, the secret societies and the symbolism and the feeling that they already know that something is rotten and corrupt in the state of Denmark, so to speak.
Yeah, and
whereas actually... older people have become way too conformist, too complacent, and also too big-headed to think, I can't change my ways. What I know is right. At least the youngster knows, I don't know shit, I'd like to learn. Whereas the older person says, yeah, I can explain it along these other terms of politics, or, they've got their own little, they've got their own entrained manner of explaining these things, and they're not as receptive. They can't suddenly open their minds to Atlantis concepts or alien intervention, and you'll always find out it's age. It's when people are debunking or scoffing at that stuff, it's an age thing. Whereas the younger person, they're into video games, they're into creative imagination, comic books, and their minds are still open and receptive, and they can say, yeah, I can take that on. Now, we do get some older people who can as well. We've had the William Shatners, and we've had the Arthur C. Clarkes, and we've got, Zachariah Sitchin, and we had Eric von Däniken. And again, love him or hate him, but there's older generation people who've definitely pushed the envelope, right? But on the whole, older people are set in their ways, don't want to know, and also they're so subliminally traumatized that they just want to have their spaghetti at home. They don't worry me about what's going on in the bigger world. It's too frightening. I've already had enough trauma since I've been a child. I'm still looking for my soulmate. I'm still looking to lose some weight. And those two things take up the whole of my fucking day. So stop talking to me about selfhood and what lies behind the car door of power. I got my plate full looking for a soulmate and looking for my twin flame and other this rubbish that the media has sold them. And they're not even whole people within. How the hell are you going to do that, even if that was a viable thing? How can you, as a broken person living in a swamp of ignorance, possibly go out there and be guided by the force to find somebody compatible with you? It's very unlikely. You've got to have done a lot of homework within in order to open up those guides, to have those guides working with you in a more positive way. Otherwise, your life is just like a lot of beads on the table without a thread. So the young people definitely respond more. Have them come to. I would say that it's about 60-40. The vast majority of the people who come to even the talks I've done have been of the younger generation, 30 and below, and many even 20 and below. So it's good.
Yeah, and it's definitely good. That was sort of how it happened for me. I kind of came into this first of all with just sort of understanding that a lot of what we're being presented in the media and in the world is is clearly false. We've got all kinds of manipulation happening, and you get into that level of it, and then you start asking yourself, what does this all mean? How does this relate to my life? What can I do about it? That's the first question you get from people is, well, now that we know all this stuff's going on, what can we do about it? And I like that your approach is, well, you can start working within. You can start changing the programming from within. You can't change other people, but you can change yourself. And from changing yourself, I found that just by trying to work from that authentic place, following my own path and working and doing the work that I do, the influence that I've been able to have with especially young people has been amazing. It's been incredible, and it's been an honor to be able to serve in that way. But I didn't do it just for that. I did it because I was going on my own path, seeking out the answers to my own questions, and it just naturally leaks off of you. Whereas other people, they might be stuck in a very negative headspace once they start learning these truths. They get very down, they get very pessimistic, and then that's what leaks out to other people around them. So the other people around them don't want to listen to that person. They shut it all off right away. So I feel like that approach of going within also is a way of better helping those around you.
And it's like we've been pointing out in these last two cards, more harshly but also correctly, and that is that the average parent is an oppressor. Not all, but in a way, aren't they the ones that sell you to these schools? The parent who, instead of putting their child into, say, a Steiner school or something like that, is just sticking the kid right in the state school, is asking for problems. Didn't they have enough hell in their own school to know the difference? And right across the board, from diet to introducing the child to their body, which is, by the way, what Steiner schools are all about. Today in school, you're forced to sit, especially the male children who've got a lot of testosterone and a lot of energy. They're forced to sit and repress all of that, and then called ADHD, if they don't.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the teacher's problem as much as it is the parent who's sticking you in the schools. Go, that's lovely, it's lovely. We don't seem to mind that he's coming back pathological. So the parent can't go and observe a pathological situation, the design of the schools, the level of teaching, the total suppression of the child. They can't spot that. How can the child spot that? Is the child going to know? Is he some prodigy? Little man Tate? No, every kid is not in the situation of knowing what's pathological. That's not their job. It's the parent's job to know what's pathological and save the child from it. So the fallout in many ways is about the parenting that's going on, and that can be, again, fixed. There are millions of scholars out there, like the Alice Millers and the people I recommend, and Steiner himself, that go into all of this matter and help us to say we don't have to invent anything. Krishnamurti, the schools all over the world doing it right. So we are sort of self-incarcerated. And, in the devil card, you see the chains around the necks of the people, but they can easily remove them and take them off. They're not like strangling the two characters in that card 15. They're loosely placed around them. So it's going to be taken off at any time, and that's our situation. We vote for these priests and these politicians, and then our children, who are the most vulnerable, are victimized by this towering hierarchy that they didn't create and probably wouldn't have approved of. William Blake has this all the way through his early poetry about the loss of innocence and the coming of experience. But the coming of experience is not in the hands of goodly men and women, elders. It's in the hands of psychopaths who steal our dreams, tell us black is really white, the moon is just the sun at night. So we were already starting off in a handicapped way. So my work, in a very subtle, sort of Taoist way, like what you're doing is a Zen way. We're not going to you. You can come to us when the time is right. And then if you come to we've done a lot of fucking homework, so we can help you. Yeah, we can definitely point you in the right direction. I'll suggest some books. I'll suggest a few websites. I'll suggest, but I'll do it by looking at that person's skills. Like I said, a lot of them coming to me are really clever when it comes to symbolism and decoding it. And other people are more interested in the other matters that I talk about, some psychology, some of the Western magical tradition, whatever it might be. Some are fascinated with the ancient Atlantis stuff, and so these are all just means to the end. They're just like spokes on the wheel. I don't hammer one particularly. I say you pick what you want. Etymology is another one. Tarot, astrology. There's all sorts of ways that I present it for people to just find out what they're about and then relate to the one that serves them the best, and then just get into it and make it their own. Don't follow anything I've said. Just get into it and then follow it down there. So the High Windows articles, the Path of the Fool, these are the encyclopedias where people can dip into and have a menu at least, instead of being completely lost in the world where nobody's handing them anything and saying, I've got my own problems, mate, don't bug me. So, I'm presenting there sort of a menu. And certainly I'm not saying that every one person must like the whole buffet. For God's sake, I know that, some people like cucumbers, others like tomatoes, right? So, but there'll be something there for somebody to take away. And the more respectfully they take it away and mull over it, then that will lead them to other writers and other things, and things I've never even heard of or didn't have the time to study. That person will then go and find out about it. So that's what it's all about.
Well, yeah, and there's that old saying that the greatest teacher just leads you to the path of your own wisdom, your own house. I mean, that's really what we should be doing, and I definitely recommend people watching this to follow up on the links. Go to Michael's website, michaeltsarion.com. There is, if you go in the forum or you read the articles, or even in the YouTube comment section, check out all the links that are there so that you can actually become engaged in this information. This is something that Chris and I really tried to develop with Modern Knowledge as well, which was that this, we're presenting a wide smorgasbord of different people with different perspectives, but really it's up to you to become active and look into it and allow this to become a journey of self-discovery in the process. And with that being said, Michael, there's something that really popped out at me in this card. And it was something that was referenced briefly in the Female Illuminati program as well. But this was really the concept of God or divinity or the divine force being right here in this world, expressing itself through the creation. And yet we're kind of missing the link with the divine, aren't we? Because we're so caught up in the afterlife or disembodied realities or spiritual realms, etc. You see this very much out there right now, where it's just ignore the problems of the world, ignore the physical reality. You don't need it. We're trapped in some kind of purgatory. So all you can really do is close your eyes and dream of an afterlife or go into some other reality. And this is something that I find is very problematic. And I know you felt the same. So maybe we could get into that a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's quite seriously meant. One has to use the word God, but spirit, higher self, soul, whatever you want. People will say, in a state of trauma, they nearly had an accident, that something miraculous came and saved them, or whatever. Yeah, it came and saved you because it was right there. It didn't have to Flash Gordon in from another dimension. If it happened, right, the thing that you claim to be a miracle. I'm not saying I believe it, don't believe, but the one who says. The person who then, let me turn this on.
It's just a slight amount of feedback there, but yeah, it's gone now.
So the person who says that the miracle saved them forgets that miracle came instantly. So then how do you reconcile that with saying that God is far away and remote? You just can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have both. So it's like the pleroma or the noumena, right? Numina is all around you. It's your Merkaba. It's the universe and you in a continual, renewing, reciprocal, relationship, like that lemniscate, that they keep showing in the tarot. There's a constant flow, or the two voices that you and I have spoken of before on our other show, where the voice of God is the listener and the speaker is the ego, taking direction, isn't it? And very occasionally, the other voice speaks to direct. So we have that God voice right within our own heads, but it's so close to us, we've forgotten it. Just like Tennyson's great poem, nearer is he than breathing, and closer than hands and feet. So that force is always there guiding us. We just think we just have this working illusion that it's a voice in our own head. But how can a voice in your head have the same sound of voice that you associate with your vocal cords when you're speaking outside?
Yeah.
And that already tells you that something's not right there. This is a mental voice that you attribute to being your own voice, and that God is quite happy, that spiritual voice is quite happy for you to have that illusion. It's not concerned, but it's the guide. So if there's any distance between us and the divine, it is because we want to play, on our own in the garden like kids. We want to get into the car and play with the steering wheel even if it's not moving. So, and the force allows us to be children in that way. It's very beneficent, and it allows us to act like what we are, which is children without a clue. And that's okay. That's perfectly all right, because that's why we grow towards a deeper wisdom when we commune with that voice. So what we have today, and I've said this from my earliest work, is that if we are not connected to that still small voice, that spiritual force, is because there's things in the way. There's an impediment holding it down. We naturally would be very much in connection with it, but because of the influence of parents and peers and all sorts of other establishment figures, the superego, creates a split between the voice of the self, the imperial self that you spoke of, and then the working ego of the day. They're disconnected, and sometimes in people it's very faint. The connection's been so broken that you barely hear it, and actually it's a nuisance now. The voice of that other conscience working is actually a complete nuisance, and we have given ourselves over to the guidance of the world. And this is tragic. So, and as I said before, this is a beautiful thing. You can't demonstrably prove, as no one has, the existence of God, but you can demonstrably prove that the constituents of your own deeper psyche have indeed been cut off. That's 101 to psychologists. That's 101, that our own being is not expressing itself fully. And so the teachers of the world need to introduce oneself to the capacities. If you took a person who had never ever understood the power of their body and showed them an Aikido master at work, they'd think it was completely magic. They'd actually think it was a trick, wouldn't it? You'd have a devil of a time saying, no, that chi, where he just barely touches somebody and the guy freezes, that's the body doing that. That's you. That's a capacity that you have. Gymnastics, sword fencing, even making a pot. Half the stuff that we do well, is always considered mastery. Great singing, great violin playing. It seems like magic if you watch somebody playing the harp. It seems, and you can't believe what the sound is coming, and what they're doing. So there's a magicalness about everything that we do, but we become over familiar with it and we lose the magic. And again, these are because of these impositions from the dead, from basically the psychotic people that are running our society. So we have the perfect right to sign off from that. But that's a personal contract. Don't worry if anyone else joins you. You've got to get out of this madhouse immediately. You're not going to wait for other people who are locked in their cells, even if you throw the door open. What's the point of waiting? This is a jailbreak. You've got to get out first, and then you can orchestrate other breaks of the prisoners that you left behind. But if they're ill, if they're lying on stretchers, if they're comatose, if they're huddling in the corner in fear of the world, fear of freedom, get the hell out yourself and sign that contract of saying, I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with this system of lies. And then remain open. This is the Taoist motto. Remain open so that the force can now show you what role you're going to take. Is it going to be through music? Is it going to be through art, drama, dance, film, teaching of some kind, martial arts, whatever it is? You'll be guided at that point once you've opened yourself up enough. Because at that point, it's not the ego that's going to decide, here's what I'm going to do. You've just broken from that world. You've just broken from that limiting world. Remember we said where now it's the ego is the servant of the imagination, the whole imperial self, as before. The ego is forced to be a representative only of the pseudo self. This is where we're at today. But I think that we're in times when people can make this change.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too, like what you're saying, the product of not being able to really stop and smell the roses, or see that painting for what it really is, or look at that person playing the harp and understand how beautiful that is and what's really going on there, is also a product of living purely in the intellectual sphere, which is where and it's an imbalanced state. We're raised like that in school. You look at everything chronologically, logically, with all these scales of balance and time and clocks, and you got to get your calendar and all this, and we live in that stressful, fervent left brain prison every day. And then we're supposed to pull ourselves out and look at something that is meant to be purely imaginative and creative, and not apply that same level of thinking to that. It's as if, like you said, we become trapped in our own mind. And when you rearrange that and you allow the ego or the interface to serve that imagination, to serve the imperial self, as opposed to only just some logical reasoning function, which is valuable, but if it's only that, if it's in a state of imbalance, then we end up missing our actual experience here, which is what I think we're here to do. We're here to have this experience and to learn from this experience.
And it's not that the reason is bad. It's about who's directing the reason, and the reason in servitude to what? The overlords? See, Hegel believed in the reason, and he spoke of it in the same way that Blake spoke of imagination. So it's not the reason per se is negative. It's a very vital part. But if it's in servitude to the builders of the global village or the New World Order, or again some other draconian religious system, then it's not good. If it's serving the pseudo self. And you see, I have the quotes to prove it. St. Paul, John Calvin, various other religious teachers are on record. I have their quotes talking about that the self is empty, the self is meaningless, the self is an irritant, get rid of it. Actually have the quotes where they denounce and deride and John Edwards, they're actually loath to be selfhood, and they loathe other people to have selfhood, and their whole doctrine is based in the erasure of selfhood, right? So if reason is now made subservient to that, writing volumes of books and proving it and making a case for that, then we're in the shit. So it's about, again, not that reason itself is bad, far from it. It's about how it's being used and abused. This
like a tool.
It's exactly the same way that imagination can also be, in a way, put to bad use.
That's right. Which is, again, with that symbolism with the card, having those keys of balance there, those polar opposites, that comes through again. There was also something that is interesting here, is getting into divination meanings, and especially as they apply to people that are doing readings. Like, how does this card, along with the meanings within divination, apply to people that are actually using it for readings and whatnot? Yeah,
we didn't get into that as heavily as I'd like. The time didn't allow for that, but the divination, the importance of the divination in this card is important because it confuses people. I've had a lot of people ask me about it. And again, I did mention that it does mean about a journey setting off, or using the reins, grabbing the reins and trying to do something unassisted. I think if it turns up in a reading right way up, it's all about you. It's an emotional card. Let's never forget that. It's a water sign, and it's Cancer. So it might mean the first stages of romance, the first stages of love, in other words, new emotional experiences that are really new to you. And that could even be, going to school, or working with a bigger group, which you've never done before, or having to conform now to a work environment where it's get up and turn up on time and create bonding with these people. Otherwise, your job's going to be a hell. And even if they seem a little bit unfamiliar to you, or from a different background, from a different class, you have to, like in a football team, for instance, or a band where everyone else is from a privileged background and you're coming from a working class background, or vice versa. A very, sort of a more upper class person not having to deal with people of a lower class. But he's got to find out, he's got to find something in common and like those people, and they all have to get on and put all these stupid differences aside. So the Charioteer represents new emotional states that awaken within you, and that you haven't really experienced before. This can come about when you meet a whole new group of friends. I remember once, I had a friend who was into a very antithetical kind of music than I was. And in the beginning, even though I liked this person, and we had good times driving around and having fun together, going to the beach and stuff, I couldn't stand the music he was playing, and I was, irritated, very irritated by the music, because it was this music of England and a certain genre, we had grown up hating on sight. And I was always ready to strangle him, but I knew he was an American guy, and he wouldn't have any background or clue why I was going, stark raving mad over the music he was playing. And of course, he really enjoyed it, and he was telling me about the history of that music and why he liked it and how he got into it. So, but it's rubbing up against me. So I'm then finding brand new, because I've always been with people who like the same music as I have. I've never actually been in the company of somebody who's diametrically opposite. And had he been in the streets of Belfast, we might have been bricking him, or him us. It's that bad, right? Apartheid. So here I am with this new experience now, driving around with this guy who I like a lot and everything, other part of him, but this music is like driving me up the walls, and it's bringing back all this hate and all this animosity, and it's because I'm not even listening to the bloody music. And so what happened was, after, in the end, me deciding, look, I'm not going to say a word, and yielding a bit, then I start to really listen to what the music was saying, and even the music itself and the lyrics and stuff, and I really got into it. And actually, those bands have actually changed my life completely. Completely, right? In every which way, mentally, musically, whatever. Not that I dislike the bands I used to listen to, but it was a blending. So there was a new turning of a corner, aided and abetted by a person who was completely clueless of all these prejudices. And yet I was the one who had to deal with all these emotions rising up and rethink the friendship, and then realize that's a lunatic. What am I doing? And go through this whole rite of passage to accept another person and their ways into my life. It was kind of a new experience. This is back in the early 90s. And I've had several other experiences like that. So that constitutes a charioteer, in one sense, having to go out and meet the world. But the world is a world that's going to change you. And if you just want to remain within that little box, like the charioteer in one way, right? Chafe, he's enclosed. It's the enclosure, not just the enclosure of the planet and the world and the place of incarnation, but the boxes we make for ourselves that are very constricting.
Right.
So even though this, it's like chess pieces on a board, right? It's not to say that the chariot doesn't have moves he can make. He can move in one direction or he can move back. But as a matter of fact, there's equal amount of limitation for all his potential moves, just like chess pieces. So we need to realize that as charioteers. Yeah, I think I've got a lot of latitude in my life, but as a matter of fact, I am the one who limits my own possibilities. Heidegger brought this up by saying, when you choose 2 possibilities, that shuts you off to 20 more. And so we have to realize that that's the human lot. And then we have to be very flexible to open the doors, when it's right, and take on board other things. Or to just realize that the speed at which we travel is our affair, the road that we choose is our affair, the attitude that we have along that drive is our own affair, right? It's like those joggers you see, or rollerbladers, they get the headphones on, and they're in the beautiful nature, and they don't even know it exists because they have some technical thing where they're timing themselves, and all this beauty of the birds flying and the river running and the clouds passing is just immaterial. It doesn't matter at all. How is wisdom ever going to come from that? So we are in so much control of our lives. But the charioteer can represent in a reading these new emotional states. It can also represent in a reading, since it is a card of conformity, not really rebellion, that it means that your life is up to here with the duties and obligations towards other people. So you're active as a girl or a guy, right? You're active, but you still are doing the will of others. That's what that suit of armor is. That's what that pre-programmed chariot is to go. It's like a pre-programmed timer. I set my computer to go off at this time. I set my egg timer to go off at this. I set my alarm clock to go off at this time. So this is the person who's really not operating at all from his own self-will, although he may have that illusion. He's serving the society. He's serving his parents. He's serving to get that degree, to go and take that job. His dad wants him to be a lawyer, and he has not had one iota of self-will because the family is expecting him to follow in the firm, follow what they've been doing, take over the business, wear this kind of uniform, carry this briefcase. I've looked out my window and seen guys growing up all through my youth who had that, and you could read the agony on their faces, even though they were charioteers. They were, I've been told what to do.
Exactly.
And believe me, they're going to do it. And I just saw them from kids, with their short pants, right up there to wearing their bowler hats.
Yeah.
And this person was dead, full of hate, self-hate, woman hate, man hate, and before you know it, they'll be on the drugs, they'll be on the pharmaceuticals, or they'll be, out there doing some other hideous criminal activity like these politicians, what they do, because their whole life they've been in conformist. Same with these people in the pre-Starkies, going around doing what they're doing, the molesting and all that horrible stuff. That's the legacy of having to play Jekyll and Hyde, because their whole life they've had to play what the world wanted. So now there's a Jekyll and Hyde, a one-eyed Jack situation. and you don't know what these people are doing behind the scenes. So it creates pathology, like I said. So the charioteer can represent that. Now, in an average reading that somebody's getting, it's not going to go to that level. It's just going to say, hey, are you really striking out on your own? How much have you been attending to your own issues? Well, yeah, I wanted to take that martial arts class. Oh, yeah, I was going to go down and take a computer class. But, Granny's sick. Or my husband lost his job, so I've just been, pottering about looking after that. Or I've had these other duties, That's like, Jesus Christ. These people are in their 80s, it's all over. You're in your 20s or 30s, can you get on? You don't have the time to waste. Get on and get that degree. Go on and do that thing. So the charioteer is all about activity in a domestic setting in which the person's own needs, and that's why you see it turning up time and time again. Even when it's reversed, that's what the meaning is that the person is now getting out of this social setting in which they're just a functionary. They need to break through this domestic sheath that surrounds them, and also maybe even there's a feeling of protection there. I had an aunt who was being very mistreated by her husband, and he was a nincompoop who cut things out of the Sun and stuck them on his wall. All right, that was his, the Sun newspaper. That was where he got his knowledge.
Yeah.
She, on the other hand, in the end, when she did break away, she went on to be a social worker and was doing some really good stuff. But even when they were married, she was the brains. She was the one actually reading some books, and So here's a woman who was like miles ahead of this buffalo that she was married to, who was cutting things out of the National Enquirer, and then quoting it to people like he was a Mensa, right? So here's a person who was just enshrouded in this cocoon of domestic duties, and yet all the time they had this other scintillating sort of capacities. She was a brilliant seamstress, really, really top notch. Had all these natural gifts, could have done really well. So there's this incarceration within the domestic, and so when you see the charioteer, it's usually about that person needing to reassess those domestic duties and say, the time has come now, especially if it's in a reverse position, to sort of put those to stop. Stop defining yourself based on what you're doing for such and such. You can only, be wiping the mouths of these people and catering to them. You have completely put your own life on suspension for years, and you don't know who you are anymore, and your own genius isn't shining. And you could be a great author of a child's book, or you could, be making aromatherapy, or you could be turning yourself on to a musical instrument or something like that. So this is also a key part of this card, and its emotionality. In the negative sense, it's definitely about over emotionality. Wherever a Cancer card falls, it's going to be about a person who responds overly emotionally to everything, and the reason isn't there, and that's what's been causing them problems. Or again, this ultra, selflessness. Other people can play on their emotional heartstrings, and then they just become altruistically indebted to that person, duties, obligations, and so on. Then there is one other aspect to cover in divination, and that means that when this card falls, I said it before about any lunar card, it's about the shifting of personas, a person who doesn't have a very strong sense of self, and therefore they're flitting through different personas. They don't even have one persona that's consistent. Because the sun, the light of the moon is actually foreign, isn't it? It's the sunlight that we use to see the moon. So it's like, symbolically speaking, the moon doesn't have its own face. It doesn't have its own persona. It only reflects light. And so in certain personalities you get this. Or even in our own lives, there's periods where we're going through this where, we seem so out of our depth and we don't know who we are, that then we model ourselves on somebody else. So fakery can be also with this card, and the endless search for a true identity. And that's why people might come for a reading, because they do feel they're in that place and they're looking to find something stronger. And they may not be able to do it because their theory is that they'll only do it when they have the right people around them. You see, which is another kind of mistake. So the counseling in a reading and situation would be then, you've got to find your new persona, you've got to find a new self, an identity, but you need to do it on your own. You've got to dig deeper and not just rely, now I've got a new bunch of drinking buddies and I fit in with them. Or, one day I'm into grunge, so I'll wear all that gear. Or, I'm into gothic music the next, I'll wear all that gear. Or, I'm into something else that's happening on the pop charts, then I wear that gear. this is this constant searching for an identity. You know, I've had numerous people in my own life who've been caught in this, so it's very, very real. And then you have to sort of, you know, coach them into saying, you know, you've got to find your own identity, but you need to do it in an authentic manner. Otherwise, you'll just be replaying this situation time and time again. So the chariot, in that sense, is those ruts. The chariot represents those chasing the tail, going round and round in non-breaking habit patterns. Cancer is habits. And habits rule a great deal of people's lives. You see, the unbreakable habits. And the treadmills that people get into, both on a psychological level and on even domestic levels, and even in their thinking patterns. You see, so it's conformity, it's tradition in ideas, it's tradition in social mores, in understanding the world. It's all tradition. I don't break out of the box. There's other cards that see that represent this radical tearing up of the map and going out on one's own, and this card is definitely not one of them. It's a very conformist card. I'd even say that the lover card before has more actual rebellion in it. You know, and certainly strength card does in its own way, but this one is about holding to what is known, not breaking patterns, and feeling very, very trapped in the end, and then getting so tied down that you're a trained animal. Even if you let, you know, a horse or an elephant that's been whipped all its life, even if you end up throwing the gates open of its prison, it operates the same way. It's acculturated. It's institutionalized. So the Cancer card can represent the institutionalization of the mind and the difficulty in breaking that. You know, and you have to say to them, oh my God, you know, what are we going to do? Can you find that Hawaiian shirt in the back of the closet? I mean, at the back of the bag, you know, and put it on. And so, you know, go ahead, you can do it. You know, I know I never wear that, you know, but you've got to try and say, loosen up a bit and change and take a holiday and think out of the box, or do something that will be helping you to do that. You know, take on a hobby or a sport. Do something that the others disapprove of. Do something on your own, without you always being in their company or they in your company. You know, and trying to, as I say, like in the situation of this aunt, finally couldn't take it anymore, did break away, and then, you know, her life, she went on to be professionally far more inspired and self-sufficient. That's I think another key part of this card.
And I relate that very much to that as well, because I was on a track myself of having what I felt to be a lot of chains. And as you said, they're all loosely fitted, but they feel tighter when they're on you and they weigh you down. And you start feeling, I was feeling like I was in this place where I was helpless, because all I was doing was serving other people's needs and living their suggestions and doing what I was obligated to do in my life. And yet I wasn't feeling whole. I wasn't feeling happy. And as I was going on this track of looking at this very philosophically and trying to change my life and free myself from these chains, I still couldn't figure out how to manifest it in the physical world. And it was only until I took a vacation and I actually went away and I actually took some time to just relax and be amongst water and get up and watch the sunrise and sunset and just kind of get into that natural cycle. All of a sudden, all these ideas started hitting me and I started having all these eureka moments. And I came back, and since that trip, since that vacation that I had, I've been able to successfully unravel probably 90% of those chains that I thought would take me years and years and years. So as you said it, taking that time to pause and have that inner reflection, and I find for myself, being out amongst nature without having cars driving by every 2 seconds, you know, having that calmness really helps center you and ground you, and then from that place you can pull from that higher that innate intelligence, I would say, and then from there you can let it flow into your life. And that was honestly my true experience.
Yeah, and being around animals, like kids like to be around animals, or even have pictures of animals, or even teddy bears and stuff like that. Being around the natural world helps. Remember, we talked about the blockage of the true constituents of the consciousness. Well, see, animals aren't so blocked. Now, we think they're lower life forms. They're actually higher life forms. We're the lower life form, because we've moved into a kind of thinking that is absolutely anti-natural and aberrant. So how we think of ourselves as a higher life form, I'll never understand. That's part of that derangement. So animals have a much more raw, rudimentary, and pure bioenergy, and also thinking. They are actually thinking, by the way, but it's a thinking that, you know, is not what we're used to. So the more time that you spend around the animals, the more that your guides are going to speak to you, because they speak in animal voices, so to speak. They speak as an animal. That's what the Egyptian people understood. That's why they had their gods, partly one of the reasons why they had these stereomorphic gods. is because they understood about, we call it instinct, see, because that's a debased word. We debase these parts of our beings. We've learned how to use talismanic words to debase these levels of consciousness. But anybody who's intelligent knows that there is an animalistic, you see, earthy, wild part of us. So when we go into the wild, and that means even just looking at a pool of water for long enough, you know, or hopefully you even go into nature. But then there's nature, there's different kinds of nature, isn't there? There's the high place, the low place, there's the forested place, there's the open place, there's the cold place, and there's the hot place. So nature has many, many different kinds of expression. But when we go out there, we are now trying to create a harmonic resonance with the wild place within. And that's where the wisdom is. That's where the lack of conformity is. We'll be seeing this when we move to the strength card. And again, lay these cards side by side, we see another fact, that in the card lust, that's the card of non-conformity. See, the one that we've been looking at is the card of absolute conformity and obedience, both to our own mental mysteria and to the ones imposed by the world, right? But the strength card, lust, is about the tantric, ecstatic experience. It's the card of love, by the way. Leo is the card of sex and love and free-flowing by our energy. It's the card of the energy that makes our world really go around, as opposed to duties and obligations and what have you. It's also the card of self-love. So it's not just about love of other people. The strength or lust card is about the self-love and breaking the bonds that tie us to the will of others. And when we break those bonds, it's like, as I said before, it's no master above, but no slave below. This is the beautiful thing. We set them free as we set ourselves free. You know, and we're happy to move into the uncharted waters with a feeling of confidence. You know, I was having some chiropractic recently, and you know, I was observing the experience of how, you know, because chiropractors, you know, and in fact, it was you telling me to go. Remember you were talking?
I was going to follow up. How did that go?
It went great. So, but as I was going through, waiting for the doctor, and then you're sitting lying on the couch, I was observing my thoughts as because remember, the whole thing is about relaxing and putting your head or any other part of your body totally in this guy's hands, and he's going to crack the neck. So I was watching the autonomic apprehension and the stiffening of the body just to let go. It's like what we're talking about. I know I'm there to get well, but there's something within the body that resists. So he's sensing and go, oh no, you gotta relax, Michael. I mean, what the hell is it?
Yeah.
You know, it's stiff and so it's like, you know, and then you have to go through this process, and then it's happening within a split second. What I'm talking about, but you know, when you unpack it, you find out, wow, look at that. Even when I knew that this is for my ultimate benefit, there's still this automatic response of resist the healing. So I was, you know, preoccupied all day thinking about it when I walked back out of his clinic, you see, out of the office, and it was, you know, I was analyzing this part where, isn't it very strange that there was this moment of resistance and this almost fear and trepidation, you know, when this moment, and what it told me is what I knew already, but I relearned it, and that is between every life and death, between every healing and sickness, there is the feeling of anxiety. It doesn't only come up when something bad is happening to us, it also arises when something good is happening to us. So there's this patterning that wants to stay within the familiar. And even when you go towards an experience that you know is actually going to help you, there's these moments of anxiety, like what you said at the very outset when you come down to these subjects. And so when a person has to live within the city and live within this conformity, then any change to their body or to their mind, any change at all, raises a level of anxiety, right? And so then I thought, well, in the macro level, we must have that bubble of resistance. We must have that armoring, no matter how thin it is, between us and the divine. That same thing that happened between me and that chiropractor. And if people want to unpack this more, they can go watch the movie Jacob's Ladder, because that's an archetypal film in which the chiropractor is like a god figure to the poor guy who's there. That's I was also thinking about that movie, because that's a sort of, has this real surreal thing where you don't even know if this guy is like God or something. He's like an angel. Of course he's not, but he represents an archetypal rite of passage moment for the character in that movie Jacob's Ladder. But getting back to the point, that little microscopic moment of resistance we have, it's like, you know, that whole thing when you say somebody put their hand up and they're already resisting you when you push on there, and you go, why are you resisting? I didn't say resist. And you go, oh, I wasn't. But they were. Now there's healthy aspects of that, of course, because we have defense. I'm not saying become a hippie and let it all go, no. But we need to observe the dark side of that, which is what this Charioteer card is all about. And then when you take it up to the macro level, my God, that thin veneer of, or on some people it's very thick, can be between us and the real, between us and the divine, between us and our sense of self. And I'm very interested in those lineaments, those walls, whether they're thin, whether they're thick, whether they're justifiable or they're not justifiable. We need to start taking that on, so that there are these experiences. And so here's the charioteer who's everything in his life is programmed. He's safe as houses. I mean, that chariot is his life, his marriage, his community, his politics, his ideas of God. So ultimately he doesn't have to move. He's seated or whatever, or he's standing quite, there's nothing actually going to threaten his life per se. But from within himself, there's the call of that still small voice saying, all is not well. You're not living truly. And so the next card, Strength, is the one who said, yeah, you're right. And then opened up that door and followed that path to say, let me then go seek. But remember the resistance? If I go seek, I'm immediately in the wilderness. I'm immediately on my own. There's no other chess pieces on the board to guide my actions. I've been freed. I don't have to make this action, or I'm not restricted, right? Like I was when there was other pieces on the board. When I leave the game, all freedom is mine. Then there's resistance, because you think you've no more guidance, when in fact the real guidance is there.
Yeah. And this is what you brought up before in the past, talking about how people talk about freedom and they want freedom, but a lot of times they're really just showing signs of fear of freedom itself. They're more afraid of freedom. What was that movie that showed this really well, where I think Morgan Freeman was in it? They were in prison and
Shawshank Rebellion?
Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, that's it. And they spent their whole lives there, and they formulated a whole system within the prison walls, and they kind of felt comfortable. There was a guy that was well known for this and a guy that had reached a certain status in that, and all of a sudden this guy's escaping. He gets out, and they can't even operate in the regular world because they're afraid of that extra level of freedom. They were so acclimatized to that prison system that when they got freed, they had to kill themselves. They couldn't deal with it.
I believe that. And see, we are living like that. It's like Alex Jones has his prison planet, and it's an excellent, excellent term to have used, because that's exactly what has been happening. But my point is that is not just simply on the political level where they've erected it, and that you have been free. You're a free person, but you've been incarcerated. No. We have already imprisoned and self-incarcerated ourselves without the help of any big brother figure. And then I get into how that happens through the parents and through all this other stuff. But then it makes the job easier, right, to an external pathological force to then come and build the physical bricks for a similar kind of incarceration.
So they're a symptom, really.
It's a symptom. It's an outplaying of, it's to stabilize that house of cards that you know is going to fall. So what you do is you scaffold it. And hopefully that's an external form of structure. And we bought into that. We actually, as I said in the Charioteer, we become the other generation of fixers. We become the trolls, with our pickaxes and stuff coming up. Let's fix it. Without realizing what is this thing based on. And your fixing of it may be making something even more artificial. Your fixing of it may be preventing real change from taking place. Maybe something needs to topple and fall so that you can have done with it, and from the ashes build something more pure. But that's that fear reaction. That's what the chiropractor is doing to me. I'm bringing you to a higher form of balance and equilibrium, but I felt a resistance to that because, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely brilliant. With your spine like a corkscrew.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me, pal. Right? As you're like completely out of attunement. It's always a death experience, a mini one or a big one, and we have to get okay with that. Now, Nietzsche's are okay with it, but the rest of our society is not okay with it. William Blake is okay with it. Wilhelm Reich is okay with it. So we need to embody this positive understanding of the rites of passage which we've gone through, walking on the stepping stones of our lower selves to our higher selves, as Tennyson said in one of his poems. And we need to be okay with looking back and seeing those little corpses along the way, like a snake shedding its skin. We need to be okay with those dead selves in a positive way, and to eulogize that as well, and realize we're always continually stripping off sheaths of ourselves so that we can progress. What's happened today, and what this card represents in the negative aspect, is not only the conformity and the sort of the structures around us that keep us institutionalized, but our okayness with it. We get okay with that. And just a little bit more, salt in the gruel, a little bit more comfortable cushions, and a little bit more, sitcoms on TV and some love scenes. And as I said, chasing some, I've got to lose more weight, or I got to do this and that. These become the preoccupation. Those are okay for what they are, but there's something more vast. And that's what the next card you see in the series represents. So there's a tremendous interplay, not just of opposites as we pointed out before, but the cards also are about these bigger themes of freedom and self-incarceration and commitment to either the self or to the will of the collective. So that you'll have this running through a lot of the cards, and that's what really fascinates me about them, is that they have these deeper meta themes running along. You know, especially as we said, if you put the cards side by side, you have two massive schools that have been operating since millennia. You know, of the austere yogas, which is meant to be the way to sanitization, hygiene, and spiritual enlightenment, or this more tantric, ecstatic path that is meant to head in the same direction. But yet, as we asked in the Emperor, how can there be these two ways? We started asking this question very briefly in the Emperor about, right, the man setting out to achieve the goal. Is he meant to it? Is enlightenment and progress something you attain by striking out like the Emperor, the hero, does? Or are we meant to sit and receive it passively? Remember we talked about that then, that there's these two modes of how you go and attain something. The active manner of doing it, and the more yin way of letting it arise when it arises, so to speak. And this is again reprised in these two cards. Do you set out and go for it? And if you do you become aware then of the paradox? See, the charioteer must be aware of the paradox, because his wheels are pulling in two directions, these horses are pulling in two directions, he's got his hands on the reins, but there's still problems. He realizes he's traveling in the ruts of other people, so he's not really on a unique path himself, and he has all these different conflicts. And also, as he's charging headlong, does he realize that the future is really the past? See, we went into length about that. That the thing that looms on the head that technically has got, I'm the future, is really in disguise. It's stuff you haven't owned. It's stuff that you had to repress in the Oedipal stage of your life, which you didn't even know. Huge chunks of yourself thrown into shadow. So then time becomes shadow time. Because what mommy and daddy didn't like, yeah, they had the power, the raw power, like society does, to just, you don't have any choice. They're going to tell you what they don't like. So you don't have any choice when you buried those things in the box. But see, those things are living parts of you, and they're going to loom up on the path ahead in your relationships, in your job choices, in all sorts of other things that you're doing in your life. They're going to come up again. And so there's this weird circularity then about time itself, something bizarre that's never been brought up by a lot of people. We said that the answer to that then is self-love. You don't have it in this card, but you have it in the next card, because self-love breaks the chain, isn't it? Those things that you disapproved of were disliked, unloved by the parents, and then unloved by you. You bought their lie and said, yeah, I unlove these parts of me as well, and they get buried into the shadow world, and made shadow time a reality for you. But if you return to self-love, then what they say or don't say doesn't matter, and suddenly the chain of time is broken. On one level, at least one of the, there's many chains, but the one mega chain is now snapped, because you're no longer repressing in the same way that you were forced, and therefore time dissolves. The next level, even more subtle than that, as we said, is to break the chain of the desire. Remember that, again, the two sphinxes represent two levels of desire. Like you already mentioned this. Instinctual desire, over which you can do nothing. A baby needs milk, a baby needs warmth, a baby needs shelter, and hopefully the parents can supply that. And the child is not conscious. These are ontological, they're inbuilt, you can't change it. And you won't be able to change it even all through life, and that's perfect. There's nothing you can do about that, except cleverly and intelligently learn how to provide those things. But then there's this whole other realm of desire that we foolishly think is the same. We have never even become conscious that there's two things happening in us that are completely opposite. The mental desire, well, I want to be a best soccer player, I love that, or you want to do something else. Architect, soldier. You see the soldiers, you see the police, and you admire that, or knights, or whatever it might be when you're watching your favorite programs, and you obviously want to do that. These are all mental desires that change constantly anyway, but they constitute volitional desires. They're not the same amount of needs as the body, impulsive and instinctual. These are mental desires that you and your neighbors can share or not. Get 10 kids together, they all want to be something different. So these are all a different zone of desire. But when we then try to go and get those desires met, there's a delay, and a delay, and a delay, just as there was with the instinctual. So time then comes in at that point. So desire and time are deeply connected. Now, although you can't affect it on the ontological level of the inbuilt fundamental, Ontological just means fundamental, unchangeable facts about your life, like you have to breathe, like you have to have skin, right? Like water is wet. You can't change that. But you can change this whole matrix, this whole panoply, this whole movement of desire within the mind. Now people think, oh, that's who wants to do that? That'll be living in a sterile way. But see, Blake refuted that. There's another imaginative thing going on, which desire doesn't need to play a part. But to do that, you have to let your senses now open to the world, open to the universe, right? And have imagination moving. So desire doesn't even need to play a part. Thing is happening already. Stuff is already happening. The dance is already happening. You know, fool, fool. You gotta bleed for the dancer. Well, what is the dancer? The dancer is the imagination that's already doing something without any controls, without winding it up, without putting the coin in, without cranking it. You know, the brain, the mind is already doing things of unimaginable depth and beauty. And we're shut off from that and then have to have these limited desires that we then call rational, right? But anyway, to cut the story short, once you start working on this mental desire, the logos now can work with you. The order, you become, you know, you're open and receptive to the order of the universe working with you. Because your desires, as we said, need not even be authentic. Your desires might still be an outplaying of what society or the parents want. So the real voice of your true self, i.e. the logos, the thing that brought you into being, the thing that pumps your heart when you're asleep, right? All of that spiritual stuff that brought you here, that meaning, is the logos, it's the order of the universe. You can't get in touch with it by an active effort like the charioteer thinks he can. He can ride out and seek it. No. You can only be receptive enough for it to seek you, because it's the boss, it's the master. You can chase your tail going through all the forest and seeking all the holy grails and saving all the maidens you want. It's not going to help if that grail castle remains hidden from you. You could walk right past it and not see it. So it's a whole different dynamic, which the next card really is more about: receptivity, emptying that vessel, being spontaneous, walking the path less trodden, right? And then what happens is you move into then being guided by that locus. But as I said, that's on the other side of the wall, and it's not for anyone to, you know, especially a personalist, it's certainly not for any of us to then define what that may or may not be. That's a map that can't even be ever charted. It's totally of another world. What we can know is the error of the ways in which we're living. So he says, the fool that persists in his folly becomes wise, right? The straight roads are the roads of science and invention. The crooked roads are of imagination. We got to start walking those crooked roads, despite, you know, the antithetical ideas of the world. But it starts with this concept of realizing you have instinctual needs and desires, and they're either fulfilled or not fulfilled. And even those, the gap even there sets time in motion. But time really, I mean, the real time we're dealing with is now the conscious desires and our forming of those desires, and then the seeking to be it, is where time, hard time, inauthentic time, mundane time, vulgar time, ontic time, whatever you want to call it, comes into play. And that is not, that's the servitude time. That's the time of the shackles. That's the time. Remember we said when we used the 2-tree system, there's the moon card, which is the most nebulous, most sorrowful, the card that deals with loss, the card that deals with death, with rites of passage, hidden right behind, you know, the fierce charioteer. My God, how brilliant that is, to show you that behind all of these people charging about, or us when we do it, is this feeling of futility, feeling that the grave is waiting. So I got to hurry it up. I got to, come on, get it done and super fast. So again, we're not looking at the scenery. We're just looking at the road ahead and missing the real journey of life. There's also the fear of failure that haunts everybody who's a creator. The anti-climax that when you reach the peak experience, you go, no, I'm bored. Is there anything else I can do? I've achieved what I wanted. Now I'm busy to get on to something else. And so the inability to sit back, and that often brings disaster in so many people's lives. People will end disaster in their life because they simply didn't know when to stop. They simply didn't know when to retire. They simply didn't know when to take, you know, a breath because they're too worried about what the other guy's doing, or I got to compete, or I got to, you know, show off more, or I just don't want to be sitting twiddling my thumbs. Always avoiding that Neptunian space, which is also about healing and again connecting with that larger force. So this Kabbalah is so brilliant. Right behind one of these most aggressive, self-willed cards, and this card that's so much about pursuing desire in this linear way, is this card of futility and loss and temporality and death and failure. You know, I find it just absolutely incredible when I look at this 2-tree system, how brilliant it is and how it brings things out. is really remarkable. But again, putting the two cards side by side, Strength and 7 and 8, and Strength and Chariot, brings up these two totally different modes of consciousness, which each and every individual embodies, and they fuse them together. I'm not saying just be one or the other. There'll always be a fusion of both. But in the end, when it really comes to the hard, deeper spiritual questions of life, the ones that are really going to matter on this planet, you've got to make that decision. Some of the world choose one, and other choose the other, and they've all got their little excuses as to why. I can't say for somebody which one to choose. It's all about their own fundamental temperament, and it's all about their ultimate sense of rebellion against the lie. If that's only a weak rebellion, well, I'll just fix a few things. I'm kind of okay with the way things are, but I do have a few suggestions. Well, that's not really throwing the prison gates open, is it? And then there's the other person who says, oh, no, it's all a lie. Like William Blake and these people say, it's completely a lie. Burn it and build anew. That's healthy. Well, not everybody's going to buy into that. Not everybody's going to go on that road. And that's why they say, very rare it is for the ones who truly become enlightened in this world, because renovating the lie, decorating the incarceration to make it prettier, that any fool can do. But you're still a prisoner. And that's what this whole prisoner series that Patrick McGowan put together. More work, less play. That's the charioteer. More play, less work. That's its alternative. That's its flip side. So the one politician comes in and goes, get back to work. Enjoy your slavery. Enjoy your chains. People are liable to rebel. So in the series, they just said, he gets up and says, my motto, my party represents more play, less work, and they would cheer. They're still in the village.
Exactly, because they still haven't achieved that balance or that inner understanding of where there has to be a certain way that you apply those principles in your life. And it's interesting too with the Cabalistic tie-in, when you brought that in, talking about the pillars, the pillar of mercy, and how this again is showing the dual nature of this.
Well, the Kabbalah is a bugger, because there's also things that haven't really been worked out, and we're dealing with a very ancient science that has been so contaminated that it still needs to be worked. I don't have a perfect Kabbalistic system. Nobody does, right? Because this is something that's still being dug up, basically, and the kind of Kabbalah that's taught today is just shash. But nevertheless, there's still brilliant things about it, right? And the fact that you find this Chariot card at the 7th zone, well, it's numbered 7, so of course it'll be on the 7th zone, but that is on the pillar of mercy. When my descriptions of it have all been basically punitive, aren't they? They're more severe, they're more... So in one way, you'd think that card should be over at the other side. But again, it's all perspective. It does fit where it fits. It's just that one has to bear in mind all of these strange convolutions. And even are the pillars really masculine and feminine? Because each Sephiroth is masculine and feminine. So it's not just one pillar that's masculine, one that's feminine. The one thing that is consistent is that the Sephirah below is feminine and the one above is masculine. This kind of works, that scheme. You see, but then again, somebody could say, yeah, but I could take it from below and do that. So it keeps your mind very open. It keeps your mind very open. But do you see that on the pillar of mercy, where the charioteer is number 7, see, Chokmah would be then male on that tree, on that pillar, because it's the top. The next one would be female, and then the Netzach would be male again. You see, and that doesn't really fit the symbolism. But then if you say that Keter, which is the top, that's male, then it changes and Netzach becomes female. See, so it's very, very hard to decide. A lot of people like me prefer to keep the Keter at the top of the tree neutral, not gender specific. But other people say, no, you can't attribute it to a gender. I don't believe that you can, because then I prefer to have Chokmah as the first masculine, then Bina is the first female on the other side, and then it goes down the tree and seems to work from that point on. But again, there's no system. This is something that is really open and kaleidoscopic. I just find that the two-tree system, 9 times out of 10, gives us fantastic insights. And we'll see that even when we go to the next card, it's so consistent. It's so consistent. And anyone who's been following the series should see that this two-tree system works wonders. It's really consistent. It really does give us good correspondence, solid correspondence. But that doesn't mean that you stick to what I'm doing. Mess with it, change it. You know, put the Fool at the first card, turn it upside down, inside out. To find your own correspondences. This is the beauty of this thing, you know. Think of the cards in both their negative and positive, and then reverse the card and think, oh, well, like he just said there, if this is a card of conformity when it's right way up, it must be anti-conformity when it falls upside down. So if I'm doing a reading and I see it, the Charioteer upside down, that's got some really good things. But I've been told by a lot of books that upside down cards are negative. Hey, that's not true. See, so now you've evolved. You've actually made some evolution. In my system, the upside down cards can be very positive. You know, the super conformity of the Charioteer, the over emotionality, the super aggression and almost violence of the Emperor, unnecessary. Look at the next card, Strength. One of the darker sides of that is just superficiality and sensualness and not thinking deeply, just going with the flow and only doing things if they're sensually interesting as opposed to intellectual. And so if that card falls upside down, that can tell you, hey, maybe it's a time for you to put those, you know, fluffy, superficial needs aside and get more serious about life. You're far too playful. You're far too infantile. You see? So this is how the mind works. And people on my mystery school, you know, the more advanced readers, they start working with this. So as soon as a card falls, they can see both its positive and negatives, and then even if it's reversed, there's positive and negatives of that. And then it's their intuition that plugs in to know which it is for their client and which it isn't. But after a while, you know, and I put all these meanings there in the Path of the Fool book, so it becomes quite straightforward after you've practiced a bit. You know, like I say, the positive aspects of the Charioteer is taking the reins, moving into a different social and emotional states that are just unfamiliar to you. And if that's upside down, there can be a negative aspect there saying you're too reticent, depending on the question of the person. Say, you should open yourself up to these new emotional states. Like me with a friend I was hanging out with, I could have chosen to just absolutely be dogmatic and say, can you turn that shit off? Here's some fucking Slayer, put it on, right? And then he would have been, oh, right? And I could have been dogmatic about that, instead of saying, look, you know, this is all new. Now, I'm the guest in the country. I don't know dick. You know, this guy's kind of off the wall, a little bit different. What's he listening to all this shit for, right? But it's like, no, wait a minute. Let's blend. Let's blend for a moment. Let's go with the flow here. And do you know something? A whole new world opened up. There was nothing wrong with it. It was all good. He wasn't an evil person. He wasn't doing this to bug me. So it was up to me to say, you know, I'm in this guy's environment. Let me learn from this. And every time I've done that in life, I have learned huge amounts of stuff. So I actually put it down as being some of the most important stuff. You know, now there's sometimes when it's going completely wrong, but on the whole, 9 times out of 10, when I've done that, it's actually been a very positive learning experience, especially for somebody as sort of rigid as I am in many of the things that I'm into. So it has been very important to be flexible like that. I've really learned those lessons. And that's what this card really represents, is either the tremendous amount of security. We've already got it. People have laid it down for me. Don't shake the boat. Remember I said about the paranoid type of mentality?
Right, yeah.
If tragedy can happen in the past, it can happen again, probably will. So for God's sake, and you'll meet people like this. That's what, you know, what do they call that, OCD? Personality type or whatever, and many other people who simply believe that tragedy has struck once in their life. So where they're going to live and what they're going to do and how they're going to peep through their letterbox every time, you know, something happens. This whole fearful, paranoid type of mentality, and you get it even at work where people are control freaks, you know, and all of that. People who never change their diet, people who never change their way of operating in life, they're totally inflexible, you know. And as I said, giving that anecdote about the chiropractor, we all have this resistance even when we don't want it. So I heard my own voice going, relax, what the fuck is this? You know, but there is this resistance there. It's inbuilt. It's part of the superego's job, partly good, but it's also there in ways that can block us opening up to something really, really positive. And so when the Charioteer falls, especially in an important position in the reading, and especially if your intuition is telling you about the client that, yeah, they're not in a very good place right now, or, you know, the kids have been birthed, and they're now at the door, right? They're 15, 16. Here's this person. They're feeling that their life is over. They've done all these domestic duties, and they find themselves in what? That Piscean wilderness that's just peeping out from behind that card. And you've got to reassure them, Forget about the fact that you're 40 something. Forget about that. Well, who taught you to think about your age and put them onto books of people who've already gone through that, who make a laughing stock of that problem? You see, and they go, oh, that book or that video really helped me. Like that movie that came out, Cocoon, where it's all these oldies, these old farts are in some old people's home, and the aliens come down, and they get all involved in the intrigue of the aliens, and it's a really hilarious movie. Or like Grumpy Old Man or something like that.
Yeah.
Make a laughing stock of this lunatic idea that it's too late. Right? That's a wrong relationship with time. That's the charioteer. He's got this big clock in front of him. Don't you get it? You throw that out, like the strength card. Become as young as you are. Go out to nature again. Take up something that makes you feel young. All of these kinds of peccadillos that people have are still operating there, and we see this time and time again in our own life. The fences that keep others out are also the fences that keep you in. Now, as I said, it doesn't mean that you become sort of like Dionysian, rolling around in the mud, let things go. That's ludicrous. Woodstock or some hippie mentality. This is a lot of people are selling you that, often in a very backdoor way. But that's not true too. You still want to keep you don't need to topple reason. You just need to reorient it. You just reorientate the lighthouse. You don't destroy it. Because that's another big mistake. And so that canopy that's kind of over his head, that little box of boundary, that's the protection, that's the security, that's the traditionalism. And most people, as you can see, even though they claim to be modern and they claim to be progressive, in thinking and in behavior, they are absolutely moribund. They're just going along with what society has created, and they don't want to shake it. If anything, they want to get in there and patch it up and fix it. And we have an overwhelming amount of people like that today who are suppressing, the voice of the new. And I've seen that in my own life many times happening, and I've had to counterbalance it and not get into the fear of thinking, if I get into this, I've lost that. Right? A bridge is between two hemispheres of land. It doesn't mean that you cross, and then that's gone forever. You have both worlds to benefit from. So that's a key thing in this fear mechanism. And it also becomes very, very important because we are breeding the children who are going to be like that in our own lives. What happens if mom and dad does not agree with what this child wants to do or who he is? That's going to come up in people's lives, and they're going to say, I didn't want him to be a virtuoso, piano player, or I didn't want him to be in this weird electronic music. That's not going to make any money. This is what people thought in the 50s from those amazing inventors who made the synthesizer and who made the sequencer. Their parents were like, what? It sounds like a bunch of squeaking machines. You're going to tell me this is the future of music?
They couldn't understand it back then.
Well, go listen to Jean-Michel Jarre now.
Yep.
He has 500,000 people at his concert. He's done Houston. The whole skyline of the city was his backdrop. Right? 20 years before, they'd have laughed at you if you'd have been doing doot, 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 doot on your keyboard.
That's true.
What the hell? Now it's changed the whole pattern of music. So somebody else can do that, hybridize that. All the greatest, whoever thought of putting a seventh string on a guitar, So it's about us allowing the freedom in expression. But we have to have that freedom within ourselves, otherwise we can never bestow it to anyone that's under our control, so to speak.
Oh, well said. And that's very, very powerful to me because, or for me, I should say, because, thinking about how to tap into that innate intelligence and bring it out, that creativity that we all have. I've always had it, but also being in Aries, I've also had that battle of wills. I've got that will, that energy to go and do, and the ambition and the drive, but I'm sometimes in that chariot and I'm driving towards the edge of a cliff, you know what I mean? And you just have to learn how to direct that will and direct that flow and direct that innate intelligence so that it's actually going in the right direction, right? And that was another thing that you did bring up was really, this idea of the will and how to, how we can express it, how we can temper it in a way, focus the will, really. That's really what this is talking about, is how do we focus that will in so that it is in alignment with the imperial self and it is aligned with the journey that you're on, and so that you can really take your chariot in the right direction.
Yeah, because remember, the will to power is only one expression of the greater will to meaning. This was brought up by Viktor Frankl, Eric Fromm. people like that, where they said that Nietzsche was hyper-focused on one expression of something that's actually a lot bigger than what he expressed it as. It's still legitimate. There is a will to power. And Nietzsche talked about the pros and cons, the positives and negatives of the will to power. Usually it's about just beating up against other people's will to power. That's what life's all about. And then they said, until we learn how to work in groups and pool our resources and have the same focus, and then the will to power kind of is calmed and you can get things done. And then he also knew about the man who just says, no, I can't work with anybody else, so I go on my own, and that's still the will to power acting. But when you really, really break it down in a more intelligent way, you discover that the will to power is just one facet of what's known as the will to meaning. And that is that each individual, it's basically what we've been saying already, that each person's will is the will to find the meaning of their own existence, or not, as the case may be. And if you have not done it in your own life, and actually consciously shut off, because this is conscious, people say otherwise, but no, this is all conscious that you do this. If you've shut off that will to meaning in your own life, you're going to be deeply threatened by anyone else in your family or friend who hasn't shut it off, and when they want to seek for that will to meaning, you're going to be one of the biggest hindrances.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, you've turned it on and your life is all about seeking for that meaning and also seeking about it in the right way, then anyone else who comes into your family is only going to help you in that process. In fact, they may be key to you succeeding. So, it takes on a wholly different relationship at that point, because in the polite, you may have birthed a child whose job is actually to help you, teach you in a way. So our fixation, the charioteer is the one who says, I'm the teacher, that's the dynamic. The lost card is saying, no, we're both teachers, that's the dynamic. Like it was with me and my friend with the music, right? So this is the more open way. It's just, again, a change in perspective. Now, the seeking for meaning, though, as we said, isn't easy because there's 101 obstacles, not only from within, that's the black sphinx, but from without, that's the world. So even a genuine person who wants to seek for that meaning is going to have nothing but obstacles from the moment of school onwards. When you're asking about questions of religion, shut up, don't ask about that. You believe as we've told you to believe, don't ask these pesky questions. And they risk you becoming actually, leaving it. They risk, because of their tyranny, they actually risk people saying, well, then I'm done with you. But they'll rather risk that because they're not going to give up their power. So the will to meaning is about the reason why you're here on this planet. So in my work, that's what I'm dealing with, is people to have this palette of colors to see how they can mix it for themselves so that they can get a grasp on, providing them with the right mirrors so that they can look into the true self, the imperial self, and say, what am I really here for? In other words, if they're doing their vocation. Most people are caught in recreation for the whole of their lives. Other people move up to an occupational, recreational sort of mold. Even when they move on, they often move sidewards, and it's into criminal behavior. It's into, destructive behavior, self-destructive and destructive. That's not going to work. So the vocational aspect is where, you give readings for. That's what people who come to you are really looking for. Some are just coming to have corrective surgery, so to speak, about, my job situation, my love life situation, and that's fine. But a very good group of people who come are looking for a vocation, and they can't find it. And there's good reasons why they can't find what that vocational shift is, because they've used these possibilities and these ones are cut off, and now they're older and they don't have time to investigate all of that. So they want, to get some guidance. And so through astrology and tarot, that's what that really comes in and say, well, yeah, we can save you time. Here's what your numbers are saying. Here's what your chart is saying. Here's what your inner chronology is saying. Because all these charts are just outward manifestations of the inner oracle, the inner voice, amplifying it for the client, But in that will to meaning is a whole different relationship. It's like working with Blake's imagination as opposed to these more ascetic paths, which are much more strict and condemnatory. The man in chains, the man who's suppressing his sexual desires, God doesn't approve, I need to be celibate, I need to, all of that shit that they've embodied. Or even more subtly, the image of God that they have in their mind. That's 10,000 years old. That's one tall head after another over in the East.
Yeah.
Percolating that. And then over in the West, they got the same shit going. They've been trampling it like grapes. And then you knock it back. Oh, I believe in that. Or some other thing you've read in a book, or some other nonsense that's been conjured. And you have those images of God, those images of reality are not actually organic to you. And if they're not, then it's the tree of inauthenticity. Then it's that inverted tree of authenticity, and you just bought a more up-to-date version. Scientology, this or that or the other. All made and manufactured by some other guy. That was right for him. That was okay for Ron Hubbard. Right? That's no problem. That guru over in the East, he had that Maharishi dude. That was his vision of what it's all about. He wants to say there's 7 stages. He wants to say there's 10, there's 2, there's 1, there's 13. For him, that's the fact of the matter. Why is he selling it to you? The real master, the Taoist master, goes, so it is, so shall it be. Whatever you want. You make it in your own image. And he's testing you. He wants to see what you're all about. Are you the conformist who's going, Master, I can't get my head any lower?
But those conformists, they want that. They want someone to tell them so they don't have to think for themselves. That's the key. That's why religion has been so successful, and that's why it's been used as a form of mind control for thousands of years, because it's been very effective in getting people away from this path of selfhood and real freedom and authenticity, and guiding them towards more shackles, really. And that's how we've seen how the political sphere and the religious sphere has worked hand in hand together, even though they try to walk, well, they actually are correct then if they're walking around saying, we are your creation, you created us, and we're just doing the job for you. Technically they're right?
They are technically right. And that's why the true master, the moment that you say, put your foot on my neck more, he gives you a kick in the balls and sends you rolling off down the hill.
Yeah.
And you go, what was that all about? That's enlightenment, mate. Right? And here's a few more punches to wake you up. Yeah. So life throws those punches at us. Life then, because isn't it true that so many of these guys, these monstrosities, have been exposed, lining their bank accounts with your money, molesting children, all these other, owning fleets of yachts. So we have to learn that way when we have these people exposed, and then it's torn apart like the communists had when the Berlin Wall fell. Any form of tyranny is on a timer. It's gonna collapse at one point. When a whistleblower comes out and says, I've worked for this false guru, let me tell you all about it. And through the internet, fantastically, we're able to know this. So these are the demagogues being cast to the ground. And that is a tremendously painful experience. But we need that because we gave them our light. We gave them our power. We gave them our innocence. The true teacher, as I said, doesn't teach you anything. He makes you wonder why you need teaching from him. He's going to address the fact that you're in servitude. He may lose you as a pupil at that point because, like you say, they don't want to change. Or he may actually, in a few cases, like 2 out of 10, really get people seriously thinking. Is like, yeah, I see what you're talking about. I've got 2 arms. I've got a brain. What am I doing? So now, see, the whole problem goes back to the youth. All of these things we're talking about mostly are things of acculturation to the lie. Steiner, Krishnamurti, others, Reggio. There's a Reggio system for teaching kids in school, and there's other ones. The whole principle there is to get the child to be so autonomous, before their age of 5, that none of this has to be like explained with a pneumatic drill. You don't have to draw pictures because the child has already got it. It's instantaneous, it's spontaneous. For instance, one of the things that they do in the Steiner schools is they make sure that the children spend most of the time out of doors, in the playground, walking in the forest, or what they have the lots, where they grow shit. And they make sure that they're there with the shovels. And what they're doing, and they even have, later on, they have these climbing frames that they make the kids really actively climb on, and very thin beams, like you have to walk on. And all these tests and trials for what? The agility of the body. Because they know that you're not, teaching this is useless. You've got to have the child know its feet, know its balance, know its poise, fall, hurt, and get up again, know how to deal with that pain. Equilibrium, movement is part of consciousness, because the standard people know correctly that consciousness is not just of the brain, it's of the whole body. In fact, very much so. And therefore, you can't just put a child in this charioteer box of a chair and a wooden table and a fixed position in the school. Just think how incredible that is. It's so charioteer-like. They want to move you, get out there and tumble and do your exercises, because they say that when the child knows the limitations of its own body, it's massively transformed intellectually and spiritually because of this. By engaging the body and knowing its pitfalls and its weaknesses and strengths, this is essential. And this is what's been left out in our armored culture, where the body, because of Christian theology, is considered something negative, something vile, something evil. Remember that quote from Alvin Boyd Kuhn? Yeah. And there's dozens and dozens of quotes from that man that point this out. this practique of self-mortification, this cult of asceticism. Well, we don't just have it in the churches. We don't just have it with a bunch of yogis on the banks of the Ganges. We are doing the same thing in a different way here with our body armoring, and the interjection of that authoritarian mindset. So my focus has always been, there is an authority out there, there is governmentality out there, there is secret societies out there, and they're all pathological. But what good is it uninstalling them if the authoritarianism that they represent and the hierarchicalness that they represent and the rigidity that they represent, you've interjected or embodied? Your cells, the meridians of your body. I mean, you know everything what I'm talking about because you have to deal with this on a daily basis when you're teaching the stiff necks that come in. They want to be Aikido masters now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Is that the installed version? The one-click version?
Yeah.
Or is it the life fucking study version?
Yeah.
Where you're moving to mastery. Oh, right? So then the tools of the trade, right, the sword, all the things that you use are metaphors for that mastery.
They are metaphors, and what you're bringing up with the way the Steiner schools and these other schools are teaching children, it is based on a martial art principle. It's based on the fact that interacting with the physical body and the physical world around you and learning balance and learning timing and learning flexibility and proper application of strength, refining techniques. These aren't really about the techniques. They're not really about the balance. They're not really about that. They're about learning these lessons in life. And really, that's my job. That's my job, is to try to tell these kids, you see how you fell today? You see how that guy took you down and there was no resistance from you whatsoever? That's a lesson that you're going to have to carry through life, that you're going to have to develop that ability to see that coming in and how to rebalance yourself and reposition yourself when that storm hits. And so it's a metaphor for a training ground for life. And I think, and I see it when I go into schools and I'll do a workshop and I got these teachers just coming up to me and they're like, look, these kids are out of control. We can't control the kids. This is the number one thing they tell me. They can't get these kids lined up. They don't sit still. They all have attention deficit disorder. They're lacking in their health, and I can't get them to listen to me. So you have my permission to do whatever you got to do to smack these kids into shape. And all I got to do is sit there and talk to these kids for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden they're listening to me and they're doing all the drills as if they already knew how to do it. And I tell these teachers, I'm like, look, it's because of what you're trying to do. It's because it's an oversaturation of trying to force them into something.
Yeah.
If you don't allow that creativity to come out and you don't show them how to do it and let them move their bodies around, like you said, like, man, this is all these kids want to do. And when you do that, then the intelligence flows. Then they start getting concepts. You see, it's magical.
And they get better sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Because the energy is burned off, and in sleep, what happens? You're touching into the deeper levels that we talked about. If you're hyper flooded and all extrovert and caffeinated up, and you're not allowed to move your body, then you don't get good sleep. You're shallow sleep, and therefore you're becoming basically a shallow person at that point. And if you look around, the things that we're doing these are the holistic ways to get things back to normal. Because if you look at our society, I mean, you cannot take a pad and count the amount of products, and they're also advertising that goes with it, that is just about losing selfhood, inebriating oneself, cosmetizing oneself so that you're not a self. Our society is saturated with it, and so you have to counterbalance that by showing some authentic models to get people to be able to go cold turkey on some of the, and that can be done at 50 years of age or even younger. As I said, I have people always complimenting me on that. You provided something. I didn't know how to get away with it. I was addicted to this religion, or I joined one of these boogaloo cults until I found out what had been going on behind the surface, And so it is very, very difficult. So we have to work with these, these traditions. But as I said before, in all of our minds, there's a natural attraction to these metaphors, to these tools of the trade, because everyone really does want to express selfhood. Everyone wants to genuinely express this seek for meaning. It's just that they've been so beaten down when they've tried to do it by the world that they've lost hope, they've lost faith, and they become disenchanted. So we have to provide that spark to say, yeah, we've done the 30 years of work that you couldn't possibly do. And we've made a place where you can come and check out a lot of this stuff and then run with it. So that's the best that we can do. Now, and through the series, it already has been there, but through the path of Fool, we're going to see it even more, that there are these two dimensions. Man is the only being that has this introspective quality. So there's nothing wrong with introspection. No animal has it. No stone or brick, nothing in the cosmos has it. They have spirit, but it's in an unconscious manifestation. And that's where it needs to be. Man is what is known as philosophically transcendent. That doesn't mean anything spiritual. It just means that man is the being who can think about thought. Man is the being who has an interior cognition and a landscape, as well as being, an inhabitant of the outward land. And that already tells you volumes. I mean, Schopenhauer built his entire philosophy out of this, and many others have as well. And it's axiomatic. It's actually the fundamental, that the human being has this unique experience of being an internal person with internal apprehension and internal mindscape. And he's also cognizant, aware of this external landscape. Now, what does that tell us? This is where, the rest of the path of the Fool is going to lead in a way. I'm trying to unpack that. And whether or not our internal landscape just becomes a simple mirror of what's out there, or whether we're bringing from the deeper core something that's going to affect the outside. What's happening now is that most people, it's the external landscape, banal as it is, that's affecting the inner landscape. You're becoming as pathological as the world outside, the simulacra. Instead, what the true man does, the man of imagination, he's bringing out from within himself something that's rare and unique, and then bringing it to the world to help shape the world. This is what was key about Hegel's theories. That's what Schelling and so many other philosophers, this is what they were really talking about the power of doing that. And in the schools today, it's just conformity all the way, where they're trying to just implant, into the soul and mind and heart of children what is already being created. But if what has been created is falling down, rotten, right, to the core, then that child is going to be in a state of total reaction and rebellion against it, or he's going to become sick to death swallowing it, which is what's happening. The children are becoming ill on a very deep cellular spiritual level. But that doesn't mean that it can't be changed. And it's up to the parent then to, as I said, diagnose that there's a pathology at loose here, and then do something about it. Get the kid back to earth, get it back to nature, back to animals, and then back to the body. Immediately, these are the solutions.
And that's a great place to kind of finish this up, Michael. We've covered so many different aspects about this card, and I actually want to rewatch this again because I found I was pulling something new every time I was looking at it. I encourage people that are checking out this series, if you haven't seen the whole series, go back to the first one. It's on Michael's YouTube channel, Unslaved, and you can get more information about it at his website, michaeltsarion.com. A ton of reference works that are there for you. And Michael, I'm also very much looking forward to our interview this week as well, following up on the female Illuminati, which for those that may not be aware, we recently just completed. And I have to say it's one of the most fascinating, mind-expanding pieces of work I've ever really had the honor of being involved with. And I definitely encourage you go and check it out. You can get it at our website, modernknowledge.ca, and it's also on Michael's website as well. So definitely looking forward to what's coming down the pipeline, Michael, as well as the next cards that are coming up.
Definitely stay tuned for that. And again, check out the links below the YouTube pages to follow up on some of the stuff, so that you realize, that again, like I said, with the female Illuminati, I'm going to these reference works, and there's a very, the world today is dumbing us down. And the way out of it is not complicated or difficult. So I can put something together in an hour and a half, but there's a lot of other references for people to, and we've spent a lot of time putting those great teachers there and these other links there, so people can check it out, and that'll take you in your own directions, But I've loved the series so far, and thank everybody for their feedback on it. And stay tuned, because there's a lot more to come.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for your time today, Michael, and look forward to connecting with you again.
Okay, David. Thanks, mate. Talk soon.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, the facts that I'm sharing here are gleaned from an analysis of their own works, ladies and gentlemen, and their artwork, all right? It's all there for the trained eye to see. It's not conjecture or speculation. The etymology and the symbolism lead somewhere. Anyone can follow it, not just insiders. Anyone can follow it. You're spiritually dead is what's happened. You're spiritually lost. Take a look around. Which is, by the way, how they want you. Your umbilical cord is cut now. You're in Mysteria, La La Land. You're in supernatural realms and disembodied realities. You're no longer here. You're no longer phenomenally present. You have no relationship with the stuff around you. That's how they want you. No, you're in the malignant hierarchies and bloody beehives designed to filter out the good, the moral, be they men or women. Here's the symbol of the Eastern Star, the Order of the Eastern Star, which is a female Masonic group. We know now that that's the pentagram, the star is the symbol of Venus. Look in the middle, the letters F-A-T-A-L, fatal. Of all the words you could find, fatal. Are we meant? What is this? Is it the femme fatale? The femme fatale? And as we said, you just need to go out into the field, Rennes-le-Château, Washington DC, and other places, and you'll see it right there. It's almost embedded, because as she ages, she loses her virginal status and becomes redundant. So now she can be sacrificed, and it is often a willing sacrifice. Her lifetime is curtailed now because she's just a channel, not a person. And she has to be replaced with a new version of one that's coming up, who's going to be a better channel, isn't it? That's the point. And we'll be dipping back into this concept again later in the program when we look at the technical advances of today's technological world. How the same thing is tying in, actually. It's not ancient, as we would think. Her daughter wedded the Duc d'Orléans, one of the most powerful leaders of Freemasonry, Grand Orient Freemasonry. He's co-founder also of the Illuminati. Well, his wife was the daughter of a royal figure, Henrietta Maria of France, an incredibly powerful person. He was co-founder of the Illuminati along with people like Baron von Nige, a member of the Grand Orient Freemasonry, and also Strict Observance, another Illuminati founder. And she, Henrietta, was connected to all the Catholic nobility throughout the world. Just as Duc d'Orléans was a Templar of Strict Observance, and she's related to the Stuart monarchy. She actually was involved in the fomenting of 3 wars with England. That's how powerful she was. But guess what? Maryland is named after her. It's Henrietta Maria of France. And right beside that, Virginia, Francis Bacon, named that after the psychopathic Queen Elizabeth I. One is Catholic on the surface, the other is Protestant on the surface. What's going on here? Well, behind the lodge door, those things mean nothing. These allegiances, they have allegiances that transcend all of that stuff, those lower level rivalries. In the Maya text, the Popol Vuh, we read something absolutely astounding. I've used this quote many times before, but it's always well worth looking at again. It's harrowing. Let us make him who shall nourish and sustain us. What shall we do to be invoked and remembered in earth? We've tried with our first creatures, but we could not make them venerate us. So then let us try to make obedient, respectful beings who shall nourish and sustain us. The Sumerian creation epic says, I will create a primitive, man shall be his name, and I will create a primitive worker. He will be charged with service to the gods that they might have their ease. I mean, it's intimately connected just from you visiting there and even reading the signposts. You don't even need to open a book. It's just openly admitted. But what does that tell us? This is really very, very, very strong proof of the thesis of this program. Just that one fact. And believe me, that's not the only instance of that kind of geometry in the world. And anyway, what are Templars, who are meant to be Catholics now, doing erecting labyrinths and dealing with pentagrams, aligning Notre Dame Cathedral with Virgo and other constellations? You think it was only done in Washington, D.C.? That's all goddess symbolism, as we've just shown. But on paper, the Templars and the designers of that locale are meant to be Catholics. So what's going on?